Money, Power, Politics. Tomorrow, President Trump is expected to sign the long-awaited TikTok deal. According to two senior White House officials, TikTok's U.S. operations will be run by a joint venture company and majority owned by U.S. investors. Its security will be managed by tech giant Oracle. The official also said TikTok's algorithm will be secured, retrained, and operated in the United States outside of the control of its China-based parent company, ByteDance. My friend Ron Insana joins us now. He's a CNBC contributor and author of the Message of the Markets on Substack. The nightcap's still here. Ron, what's your take?
I guess this is the best we could have hoped for without a complete ban on TikTok, which, you know, there are 170 million Americans who do use it, including all of our children who are, you know, Gen Z types. And so you too? Okay. So having said that, there is a concentration issue with respect to those inside the United States who are going to own it. They're all billionaire friends of Donald, if you will. And so we're seeing this tightening noose around media, broadly speaking, among those who are closest to the president.
Talk to us about this media consolidation, and specifically, right, we can just say as a headline, it will be controlled by Oracle. Oracle, that's Larry Ellison, who right now is the #2 richest guy in the world, right after Elon Musk, who's the #1.
Yeah.
What should we know about Larry Ellison and his interests and his power right now?
Well, Larry Ellison sort of went from being someone that we tracked here and there at Wired to all of a sudden being like a main character in the cinematic universe of Wired's politics coverage. I mean, he is an operator. We know that he was a very enthusiastic Democrat for a long time, aligned himself with Trump in, I believe, 2020, again in 2024, is now very much aligned with the president.
Why? What is it that they have in common? Or is it that for Larry Ellison, the president is for sale or for rent, or he can just get his way?
Larry Ellison is an operator and a very effective business operator. So we saw him standing with, you know, Sam Altman and others, and President Trump announcing this massive investment in AI infrastructure earlier this year, Stargate. We are now seeing him sort of cozying up to the president vis-a-vis this TikTok deal. There are many opportunities for Larry Ellison and the Ellison family in Donald Trump's America. And I think what's most notable to me, and I think what really should be concerning to everyone, is you are looking at sort of Larry Ellison and the Ellison family. We're now talking about Paramount, CBS. We are potentially talking about Warner Brothers and CNN. We're now certainly talking about TikTok, and again, controlling and retraining an algorithm that dictates what 170 million Americans will see and experience on that app. That is an incredible amount of consolidation of media and culture and user data in the hands of essentially one billionaire family.
So is this a new way to sort of dictate what freedom of speech looks like, right? We're talking about freedom of speech nonstop in the last 2 weeks. And underneath this, you've got a potential media conglomerate or more that they might support freedom of speech, but the speech that they like is the speech that Donald Trump wants.
Right. I mean, I think what we're talking about is corporate censorship, or at least the possibility of corporate censorship. I mean, there's the old phrase, freedom of the press belongs to the person who owns one. And I think we're seeing that in the digital age. I also think, I just want to say one thing about TikTok here, which is this was such an own goal from Democrats.
Yes.
Right? And I feel like it's always fun picking on Democrats, but this one they really deserve, because this was overwhelmingly supported by Democrats, even though Jim Himes, among others, right, top Democrat on the Intelligence Committee, said we don't need to do this, actually. Democrats overwhelmingly fell for this idea that we needed to sell this company. And what if Donald Trump becomes president? Well, we're not going to worry about it. Turns out we should have worried about it. And I say that in part to be forward-looking. Let's, as Democrats, and I say this as a Democrat, try not to repeat that mistake if we ever get another chance to make those kinds of decisions.
And it's not just media concentration, it's also the merging of technology companies and media, which then produces reams and reams of data on American consumers, American behavior, American thought processes that are going to fall into a very small group of hands.
And it's only going to bifurcate us more when we talk about the divisions. This is exactly how the divisions deepen and get monetized. But I want to talk about this new polling from the AP. It shows that only 37% of U.S. adults approve of how Donald Trump is handling the economy. Does that surprise you? Because scores of Americans who do not care about politics, who don't pay attention, did vote for Donald Trump based on the assumption they didn't like how President Biden was handling inflation, and they thought business guy Donald Trump will handle the economy better.
No, inflation's not down. Grocery prices are up. Gasoline prices are really the only thing that are flat to slightly down.
Everything else is more expensive.
Everything is more expensive. Housing is still more expensive. You also have the labor market weakening notably, so the economy is indeed slowing down. Mark Zandi from Moody's Investor Services put out a great chart last week. 49.2% of consumer spending in the United States is done by the top 10% of all wage earners in the United States. So what you see is if those folks were to stop spending, we would be in recession because consumer spending is 68% of GDP. So we have a very bifurcated economy, the K-shaped economy that we talked about a couple weeks ago, where those at the very bottom or even in the middle are just keeping pace with inflation that is stuck.
Okay, so then if inflation hasn't improved, the other reason why the business community was hyped up on the idea of Donald Trump is because they were all about free markets. They didn't want to face a ton of regulation. But I want to make it clear. Just 3 months ago, right, Donald Trump got this golden share against U.S. Steel, and now you've got his Commerce Secretary blocking U.S. Steel's attempt to stop processing at an Illinois plant. Like, this is the kind of thing that when people said we can't elect a Bernie Sanders, he's going to try to involve himself in private business. For the government, for the U.S. government to say you're not allowed to close this plant, how is that free markets capitalism?
Well, it's not. And we're following both Japan in the 1980s and 90s or China later than that with this kind of state capitalism model where we have a 10%. Well, the U.S. government now has an 8.8% stake in Intel, a semiconductor computer chip maker. It has a golden share in U.S. Steel. It's talking about taking a stake in a lithium producer. And so more and more, the government is looking to have partial ownership of private corporations, which, again, is not the model that we've followed. In fact, quite the contrary. It's a model that Japan and China have followed over the course of the last many decades.
Howard Lutnick said it right out there in the open in an interview last week with Mike Allen from Axios. I want to share a bit of it.
I understand the president is looking closely at prescription drug prices. What are you and the president considering doing in that area?
Americans pay a high price for drugs, and then the rest of the world pays barely above marginal costs. The costs in America are insane. So he's saying, look, if we can get the rest of the world to pay more, we can pay less. And it works out fine. The president's going to say that you drug manufacturers cannot sell here unless you sell there at a higher price.
Where are the Republicans screaming, socialism is coming our way when Democrats are in power? Like, I don't understand how any old school Republicans are down with this.
It has been one of the most remarkable parts of this Trump 2.0, hasn't it?
I sure think so.
That you see this sort of, I've done a lot of reporting on this, right? Because the Trump administration is stuck in the administration before its problem, which is that prices are going up. You're promising that in the long term, things are going to be better. The public doesn't really like that. They can't figure out a way to talk about it. There are a lot of Republicans who are like, we've been talking about this for a long time. We have a message on this. We have a plan on this. And they have been kind of silenced by this administration and its efforts to change the way economic policy works. And we just really have not seen anybody step up. And I'll tell you, the midterm election is coming, right? We've seen that turn away from talking about the last election to the next election. And I think you are seeing some Republicans start to get nervous about this. You can see when it comes to the way they talk about the big, beautiful bill, and they're concerned with talking about that. We've seen the Republican Party have to change its messaging on this several times about this bill. They know they have an economic problem, but they
Who's
don't.
They?
The Republican Party knows they have one going into the next election, but they don't really know how to talk about where the problem really comes from, which is that White House messaging that is just not landing with people right now.